To ITScholar. Today we are going to see an implementation of OSPF with which we are going to see two versions, that is version 2 and version 3. In this we're going to see how we are going to set up a single area OSPF as well as a multi-area OSPF with both version 2 and version 3. Also we are going to use some route summarization and filtering. Now before we start, OSPF is a link state routing protocol that we are going to be using in order to find the best path between its source and its destination. Now there could be multiple routers in between the source and destination. So it finds the best shortest path to reach its destination from the source. Now the first step is you will need to have a router that is 3725. Okay, now how to configure a router in your GNS3, that I have been explaining in the I've explained it in the other video, but for now we're just going to configure the router that we have here. So I'll configure this router and make some changes in this. First of all, we need some slots, so I'll be selecting two serial slots here, and slot 0 would be my fast Ethernet. Okay. So that is the first thing that we'll be needing, and in advance everything looks fine, usage, general. Alright, so these settings are okay. So I'll click OK here. Just here I would like to see, yeah, so the WIC, which is the wireless module, we will just enable these as well, so that's okay. Anyways, so now let's move on to adding the routers onto our topology. So I'll add one here. So this will be my router 1, router 2 and router 3. Okay, so we'll need 3 PCs as well. So PC 1 here. Okay, I'll select desktop, local. Here another one and another one here. Now the PC and the routers are going to be connected via a LAN cable, and the routers with each other are going to be connected with a serial connection. So I'll take the fast Ethernet here and connect with my Ethernet port of the PC1, another one here connected to Ethernet 0, one here to PC3. Okay. Okay, there's some issue with our dynamics. Okay, things look fine. Okay, all right, so that's just a warning, we can ignore that for now. Then we'll be connecting the serial connections. So one will go here from serial 0 to serial 0 1. Okay, then 1 1 from here and to 1 0. So that depends on what you choose. Okay, accordingly you're going to set your configuration based on what your Ethernet ports or serial ports are. So your interface should match with the interface that you have used. All right, so now let's give some identity to these devices. So my PC will be having the IP addresses that I'll be needing. So first I'll just statically write them down so we don't get lost with what IP addresses are there for each device. So one would be starting with 192.168.1.1. This would be 2.1. This would be 3.1. Okay. Next, we're going to have the gateway. So for the gateway, I'm going to have an IP address here, since this PC is connected to router 1 and this one is to router 2, PC3 to router 3. So each of them will be having their gateways. So 192.168.5.0 is the gateway of this PC. I'll have another one here, that is 192.168.2.50, and one here, that is 192.168.3.50. Alright, so this is done. Now we have not done any configurations yet. This is just for our reference. I'll enable the interfaces. Okay, so this was 1 1. All right, so this will come here, this will be here. Okay, looks good. So now we are going to configure our routers IP addresses. So we're going to have the labels here too. So this will be my 10.1.1/24. This will be there are two interfaces, so there will be 10.1.1.2 here, and there will be one more interface here, so I'll be having that as another network, so it will be 11.1.1.1/24. Okay, so this is one network and this is another network here, and then we are going to have 11.1.2./24 here. Okay, all right, so makes sense. Now we're going to have them set up. First, I'll start up the connections, start all devices on, and okay, so there's no issue with this. Let's configure our PC. So I'll enter my console mode, and I'll type in the IP address of what we have configured here. So for reference, I'll just drag this here so we can easily see our design and our configurations. Okay, so 192.168.1.1/24, and the gateway is 192.168.1.50. This is the gateway here that we have specified. Okay, looks good. Let's check. So we have our gateway set and our IP address set. Okay, let's move on to PC2. Okay. So IP 192.168.2.1, and the gateway will be 192.168.2.50. Show IP. Looks good. PC3. Shift this a little bit here so we can see our labels well. IP 192.168.3.1/24, and the gateway is 192.168.3.50. Alright, so this looks good now. Let's configure our routers, and then followed by the OSPF configuration. So first we're going to set up the interfaces of our router. We need to enter the config mode. So conf t. Once we enter in, we are going to set the interface fast Ethernet. So I'm just writing that in full form, but yeah, you can use short forms there. And you will going to specify your IP address. So in this case, our router 1 has an IP address as 192.168.1.50 at this F0/0 interface, subnet mask, and then no shutdown. Okay, exit. So this is one interface configured. I will go on the other one, that is a serial connection. So we'll set that up as interface serial 0/0, IP address 10.1.1.1, which is here as you can see, and then 255.255.255.0. Okay, no shutdown, exit. So this is done. We are okay with router 1 now. Go on router 2, console. We have two interfaces here and a third one here. So This is the F0. We have the 0/1, S0/1 and S1/1. So in total 3 interfaces we're going to configure on R2. So let's enter the config mode, conf-t interface serial 0/1. The IP address, as we have noted, is 10.1.1.2. Okay, specify no shut. This is done. Exit. Next interface is serial 1/1, the right hand side one. Okay, the IP address there is 11.1.1.1 space 255.255.255.0. No shutdown. Exit. Another one which is down there giving us a fast Ethernet port, so that's interface FA0/0. So this is the shortcut that you can use for fast Ethernet. Specify address 192.168.2.50. No shutdown. Exit. So that sums up our router 2. Go on with router 3. We have 2 interfaces there. One is a serial one and the other one is the fast Ethernet here. So conf-t interface specifying serial 1/0. IP address is 11.1.1.2 255. Okay, no shutdown. Exit. And the last interface, that is the fast Ethernet, so that will go as FA0, IP address being 192.168.3.50. No shut. Exit. Alright, so that's all with the router interface configurations. Now I would like to actually want them to be saved as far as the configuration is concerned. So I'll just do an exit here and I'll do a copy running config start and just build the configurations that I need. Same thing I'm going to be doing on router 2, that is copy, exit first, and then in privilege mode you do copy running, okay, dash config space start, startup config, and build that as well. Okay, so I'll just do it here as well, just to be sure. Alright, so this is done. Now in R3 we are going to do the same one, that is exit here and copy running config space startup dash config build configuration. Alright, so this is done. Now we'll be verifying our interfaces. So I'll go back to my router 1 and just check if our interfaces are properly configured. Oops. So as we can see that fast Ethernet is configured, another serial, and yeah, that's all as far as the first router is concerned. Now we'll go with second router, that is an interface brief, and we see that we have the ports that we configured properly assigned to the IP addresses we want. Okay, we can see one more serial here, it's up. Now on router 3, show IP interface brief, and yeah, the configuration looks fine. Alright, so now let's move on to our first objective, that is to test a single area OSPF version 2 for any IPv4 addresses. So the first thing we're going to see is we're going to check on R1 if our single area configuration of OSPF works. Okay, so I'll enter the config mode first, and I'll do a router OSPF enable, and I'll specify the network as 192.168.1.0. Okay, give the subnet, and I'll specify this as area 0, and then I'll create another network here which I'll specify as 10.1.0, and call it as area 0, exit, and do write the configuration. So now this is a single area OSPF, so just for your reference I'm going to make a circle here, and let's see if this thing makes sense. So this is the OSPF area that we are looking at. Okay, and I'll just style this up a little bit, so you can have this as dot dashed maybe, or dotted. So yeah, this is area 0, as we can say, of the OSPF that we configured. So I'm going to test that in router 1. So for that we are going to do an SH in privilege mode with protocols. Okay, SH IP protocols, which will show the routing for these networks, okay, and the gateway information that we have here that is shown on R1. Okay, so this is an important step whereas the OSPF area is concerned, and the importance of having area 0, single area OSPF, and then to test if the single area works on R1, we're seeing it here, with which the configuration is properly done. Now this shows that the router 1 which is using possibly an OSPF, so I'll do an OSPF neighbor here to see if we get any results. Okay, so we have a neighbor here which is 2.50, which is not being displayed. Okay, all our OSPF configurations on all our routers. So router 1 configuration for OSPF, to verify it, if we see it as show IP protocols, so we can see that the routing protocol for R1 is OSPF. Now we're going to see that even in our case of router 2, so we're going to configure router 2 as well with a single area OSPF. So it will be conf p router OSPF 1 network. We're going to specify the IP address, so 192.168.2.0 here in this case. This will be the area that we are creating, and the subnets mask, and then the definition of the area. So again, network 10.1.1.0 mask and the area. Okay. Now, in this case, we have 2.0 here as well as this area, that is 1.1.0, okay, and 1 here. So all this comes under area 0. So I'm going to I'm just going to duplicate this here and widen this up a little bit so we can get an idea that this is area 0. So one single area OSPF here as well. Specify the next part of the network that is on the right hand side, so it will be 11.1.1.0 subnet mask and area, exit and exit right. Alright, so this is done. We're going to test R2's protocol also, so we're going to do a show IP protocols and see if we have OSPF enabled. So we have that done here. We can see our neighbor showing up the router here as well. So now this looks fine. We're going to see in router 2 here, router 1, so we can see our neighbor up here too. Earlier we were not able to see this, but now as we did the R2, we can see that shown up here. Next, we're going to go ahead with the next router, that is third router, okay, R3. So we can check once that if R1 and R2 are sharing some information together. So we can do a show OSPF, show IP OSPF neighbor to see if we have any neighbor. And yes, we can see that R1 does have a neighbor 2.50 beside it. So this looks good. Okay, this is something that we were not getting earlier. It was showing up blank. Next, we're going to check in R2 that if it shows that R3 is a neighbor. So right now, if I do a show IP OSPF neighbor here, okay, it will give information, but for the left hand side network, this side R1. We don't have anything on R3, so we need to configure that first, and we'll go ahead with R3 right now. Okay, now in R3 the same steps we're going to follow, that is configuration of a single layer, a single area OSPF. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead with config mode. So config T, router, we enable OSPF here, network we will specify as 192.168.3.0. Okay, this is on the R3. That is what we are configuring here, and we're going to exit this and basically write the commands on R3. Okay, now if I exit this mode and do a show IP protocols, it should show me up that OSPF is enabled and would give me details of R3 having its neighbors connected. So now if I go ahead with show IP OSPF neighbor, it will give me the details of the left hand side network. Now I go back on R2 and try the same, and I should see the left and the right both neighbors together. So this was just to test if everything looks good. This was an example of a single layer OSPF, single area OSPF with version 2 configuration. Okay. Place this here. Okay. So yeah, this is how OSPF functions when we configure a single area version 2 OSPF network. Now we'll go ahead with the next part, that is implementing a multi-area OSPF. That is also version 2. Okay. So for that we'll need 4 routers. Now in this case, as we can see here, we have already set up this topology. So I'll be saving this and creating a new project. So I'll call this as multi-area OSPF version 2. Okay. So next step, we're going to have 4 routers here. So router 1, router 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'll be connecting them with fast Ethernet. So we have all our slots available. So we're just going to directly use the slots. Okay, so now there is a connection between our 1 here and R2. So R2 will have this fast Ethernet connection here, and now I'll just switch this off, switch this on, and see if this boots up. Okay, so they do, and now we're going to go ahead with building our network. So the first step is configuring router 1. I'll enable the interfaces. Okay, here. Okay, now before I do the configuration, let's decide what each of these routers will have as an IP address. So this will be having 192.168.1.1, sorry, 11.1. Okay. Oh, you can just go ahead with 1.1. It depends. So this time I have just taken 11.1 as my F0/0 interface. The router has, since it's router 3, I'll give this as 3.3.3. For router 1, I'll give that as 1.1.1, or you could just give the IP address on the interfaces. So we have 2 interfaces here, F0/0 and F0/1. So F0/0 will be similar to what we have on R3 with F0/0. So it will be 192.168.11.2. Here it's 11.1. So we'll have 11.2 here, and then an IP address here which will be 192.168. We cannot keep 11, so we'll do it 12.1. Here we will have 12.2. One 192.168, 13.2, so we cannot have that 12.2 here, and this will be 13.1, so 192.168.13.1. Okay. So router needs a loopback, so we'll give an IP address here, so it's 4.4.4. I'll start building the network and see if we can get some results from this. So our objective is to create a multi-area OSPF using same version 2 OSPF. I'll open up the console for router 1, shift this a little bit on the side. Okay, close this up here. want to have everything just refreshed. Okay, so we are in the privilege mode. Now we'll get into conf, and we're going to specify interface fast Ethernet 0/0 for router 1, IP address as we have specified 192.168.11.2 is the interface of F0/0. Give the subnet mask, no shutdown, exit. Next, configuring fast Ethernet on 0/1, which is the second interface here. The IP address no shut, exit. So this is done for R1. I'll go ahead with R2. Here also we have F0/1 and F0/0. So 0/1 is configured. Now 0/0 has the IP address 192.168.13.2, subnet mask, no shutdown, exit. Going ahead with R3. In this case, we have a loopback that is 3.3.3. Now, generally, you can have another line created here, but I'm not doing that for now. This is loopback, and you know that we're going to specify by interface loopback 0. Okay, so I'll be going ahead with interfacing this one here 192.168 first, and then going ahead with loopback. So conf t interface pass Ethernet 0/0, IP address 192.168.11.1, no shut. Then we're going to configure the loopback. So loopback 0, give the IP address 3.3.3, and exit. Okay, so this is done with R3. The same now for R4. So console, first the interface, pass Ethernet, then the IP address, which is 13.1, no shut, exit, and then the interfacing of loopback. Generally, you can give a short form as LO also. So loopback 0. Okay. Now the next step is to test our multi-area OSPF, which is version 2 on router 1. Now for that we need to set up an OSPF. So a router OSPF, the one which we did earlier in part A. Okay, now I'm going to create a network which will be a multi-area network. So 192.168.12.0. Okay, we can see where this is coming, 12.0 here. Give the mask, specify area 0. Okay, now this is one area that we have created. We're going to go ahead and create a second area, giving the name as area 1. So network Okay, 192.168.11.0. Now you know where that is coming, which is here, and naming it as area 1. Okay, this is two areas that we have created for router 1. Okay, I'll do an exit, and to verify we just simply use SHIP protocols. And yes, that actually shows that we have these two areas. Okay, so now you might not see router 3 information here because we haven't configured OSPF on router 3, which we actually should do, because then it won't show up in that router. Okay, so we will go ahead with doing with router 3 first, and then we will see how the neighbor actually works here. So we do see that routing for network is shown up here, which is two areas, but routing information source doesn't show us router 3 details here. So like we did in the first part, we're going to configure router 3 and establish a connection between the router 1 and router 3. So already we are in the config mode, so I'll do a router OSPF and specify network 192.168.11.0 area 1. Okay, so this is under area 1, so we're going to specify area 1. So I'll just draw a line here, I'll just draw a circle here, so we know that this is one area, that is so this is area 1. Okay, can keep this here, and I'll draw another circle here which will show me area 0. So this is another area, that is area 0. So now this becomes a multi-area OSPF that we are looking forward with. So going back again, network in router 3 is 192.168.11.0, that is area OSPF 1. Okay, bring the router loop back to in this same area and exit. Now let's go back and check our router 1. So now we can see that there is some development here in router 1, okay, which actually shows us router 3 information. Now we'll do a show IP OSPF neighbor, and we can see a neighbor here, which is router 1. Okay, we won't see router 2 because we haven't done anything with router 2 yet. So I'll be going ahead with router 2, router 2's configuration, and we're going to check if we can go back again on router 1 and see if our neighbor does show up in router 1. So in router 2 we will be setting up our OSPF area there as well. Enable OSPF network 192.168. Here in this case it will be 12.0. Okay, the same one which we did here. Just go back and yeah. So as you can see, we have area 0 as a OSPF area here. So the same we are going to configure for router 2 and bring that router also in the same area, under same area. So this is area 0, and we will need another area here for router 2 and router 4. Okay, so we're going to go ahead with this part as our area 2. Okay, so we have area 0 here, area 1 here, and area 2 here. So this will be our multi-area OSPF. Okay, so I'll just set that up here itself. So 192.168, since we are in router 2, so we will do that on the go. Okay, and this will be area 2, right? Makes sense because we are in router 2 and we have F0 as our interface connecting with R4. So okay, we have configured R2 here. Now if I do a show IP route, I will see that it does have OSPF. Okay, but when I do an show IP OSPF neighbor, it will show me the one which is on the left hand side, not on the right hand side, because R4 doesn't know that, okay, I am part of the same area. So right now I'm not drawing that circle unless and until I have R4 configured according to area 2 that we have here. So I'll go back to router 1 and see our neighbors right now. So we can see that we have 192.168.13.2, that makes sense, and as well as the one which we have on the left, that is R3. Let's go on R3 and see if we can get any neighbors here. Okay, we can see 12.1 showing up here. Okay, that's correct. So this looks good. Now everything that R3 has learned is from another area. That's why we can see that there are inter-area routes in R3. Okay, if I do a show IP route OSPF, it is learning these routes. Okay, and it has figured out that there is 12.0 and 13.0 as well. Okay, it doesn't have any information about R4 because we haven't bought that in area 2 here. So let's go ahead with R4 and configure R4 so we can actually have that in the same network. So R4 is the next part that we are going to configure. So I'll call that R4's area with R2 as area 2. Okay, so router OSPF1 is enabled. Next is network 192.168.13.0. This is area 2 and the loopback information of router 4. Okay, so now I can go ahead with creating this circle here. And let's call this as area 2. Okay, looks good. Now we have 3 areas in our OSPF network. So we can go ahead and check our neighbors. Okay, this looks good. We'll see here OSPF neighbors. We can see we have the 4th router coming in. Checking R3, and now we can see this one coming up because now it's part of area 2, and checking router 4 for its neighbor. So it sees that this is also its just adjacent neighbors. So yeah, this is actually an example of a multi-area OSPF that I have done after a single layer implementation. Okay, so this wraps up our multi-area OSPF configuration. The next part is route summarization and filtering. That is the next part of our implementation in OSPF, and we're going to use some specialized commands to actually get that. So the first step is to follow the same topology that we have created here right now, and we're going to add more loopbacks to our router 3 and configure the OSPF accordingly. So we'll have more loopbacks in these routers and then see if what results we get from the OSPF. So we'll go to R3. Okay, I'll just close this down and re-establish the console. Okay. All right. So entering config mode, configure a loopback, and let's specify an IP address 172.17.0.1. Okay. No shut, exit another loopback, that is loopback 1. This will be address as 172.17 and let's say 1.1. Okay, 255 subnet mask, no shut, exit another interface loopback as 2, call it as IP address 172.168, sorry 17 dot, okay, it's 11, so now it will be 2.1, and the mask, no shut, exit another loopback, calling it as IP address 172.17.3.1 with its mask, shut, exit. And let's give another one. So before I give the fourth loopback, so I'll just add these here for our reference. So what exactly I'm doing here is I'm adding some more loopbacks to my router 3. I'll just place these here. Okay, so for understanding, I'll give LO here, which is loopback. Okay, we have some loopbacks here. L0, which is LO0, that is loopback 0, is having an IP address 172.1.7. Okay, 17.0.1. We have loopback. Okay, this is loopback. This is loopback 1, that is 172.17.1.1. This is loopback 2. That is 172.2.1 and 3.1. So we'll give this as 7.2.1, loopback 3 being 172.3.1, and loopback 4 will be having 4.1. Okay, so yeah, we have left loopback 4, so I'll just configure that, giving interface LO4 IP address being 172. Okay. Now this is done as far as giving loopback interfaces is concerned. Now the next step actually in this is to have an OSPF on these loopbacks to create a separate area with these loopbacks. So what we are actually going to do is we are going to configure OSPF on these loopbacks. So the network will be nothing but the list of IP addresses specified in the loopback. I will call this as area 1. So they will come under this area. Okay. So just extend this a little bit here and get them inside this area. So this is area 1 and this is area 2. So add these IP addresses, specify that they are under area 1, loopback 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now if we perform show IP route on R2 for instance, we can see that all the loopbacks of R3, okay, in this case this will actually give us an idea that these are loopbacks, and we actually can configure loopbacks in our OSPF networks. Okay, so yeah, this was an example to show that these loopbacks can be configured as an OSPF under OSPF area. Okay, we do a show IP route, okay, and we see that we have these IP addresses shown up here in R2, okay, that is part of the OSPF network. Okay. Now in this we are not summarizing anything. What we have done right now is we have added these loopbacks under area 1, but if we want to summarize the data which is being received, we are going to perform a summary operation. Now in that case we are going to do some configurations on R1 for that. So I'll do a configuration on R1. I'll enter the config mode, specify router OSPF1, give an area 1, saying that area 1's range is from 172.170.0.0, meaning that we are considering these loopbacks. Okay, that is what we are specifying using range to get an idea, to get the statistics, that is as a summary, okay, with what data is being received from this end. Okay, now if I do a show IP route, earlier we were not getting any information when we did a show IP route on R2. Okay, so now if I do a show IP route here, okay, what we can see is that the network area, which is subnetted into 2 subnets, okay, that is actually showing up here because summarization based on the range and their mask is also given, and what we can see here is a total information about all the OSPF networks, okay, its interfaces, and via which device, via which interface these information are coming from. Okay, so there is a minor correction here, that the reason why we are not able to see the summarization in R2 is because we have to set the range here as router OSPF. Okay, I'll just reconfigure this part. So configure T in router 1. We specify that we need to set the range. So OSPF, we set it as 1, and the area as 1. Range will be 172.172.0.0, 255 here, and 0. This is the correction here. We need 252 specified in our subnet mask. And so now what happens is, if I do a show IP route here, it will basically change from 5 subnets to 2 or 3 subnets. Okay, so okay, this is neighbor, so I'll do show IP route, and we can see that the subnets have been reduced from 5 to 3. Earlier we could see here that there were 5 subnets. Okay, but now once we do the summarization, we can see that there are 3 subnets here. So yeah, that's all actually in case of summarization to discuss. This sums up our understanding of multi-area OSPF, as well as how we could summarize this information that is from R3. Now from R2 and R4, you can actually ping and on any of these loopbacks. Okay, so they are part of this area 1. The next